Hi, everybody, and welcome back to the Coaching Collective. This is our second episode, and I'm so glad you're with us again. For those tuning in for the very first time, I'm Mridula, and I'm joined by Anna, Chris, and Caitlin. Today, we're talking about something we all feel: the weight of constant headlines. From tragedies like the Minneapolis school shooting to Canada's ongoing wildfires to safety concerns with companies like Uber. It's easy to feel anxious, even distrustful of the world around us. There's a saying from mountain climbing I love: courage isn't climbing without fear, it's climbing with fear in your backpack. Even the most experienced climbers feel afraid, but they keep moving, one step at a time. And isn't that true for us too? Fear doesn't disappear just because we're strong or experienced. We learn to carry it and keep moving forward anyway. And here's what we want to explore today. How do we live with this constant stream of tough news without sinking into fear, anxiety, or distrust? How do we move forward, grounded and resilient, while still caring deeply about what's happening in this world? I'd love to start by asking each of my fellow panelists, when you hear the headlines like these, what's your first gut response? And how do you personally keep from getting stuck there?
So one of the headlines that has affected me more recently is the wildfires. It was something that I never dealt with. And when moving, I thought, what am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to react? If there's a fire, I don't have the resources. I don't know. I know a tornado, I know a hurricane, like you want to evacuate, but how do you even know where the fire is going to go? How do you know a safe evacuation? And I think one of the things that helped me shift my perspective is the reality of the situation is we have a lot of notice. There's helicopters here all the time. There's drones flying all the time where they tell people to evacuate before you actually need to. And a lot of times the news is covering those people who stay because that's something that's interesting. So when I was looking at it, I was looking at worst case scenario. And worst case scenario is not reality. It is usually far from reality, the same as news is, because it's a shock factor. It's on a scale from 1 to 10, it's going to be at 8 or above because they want somebody to be entertained. So I try to look closer to what are the facts instead of filling in the blanks and thinking, I just don't know how to deal with this. Let me find solutions. Let me see what would really happen in that kind of scenario.
Yeah, that's such a good point, Caitlin,
Yeah.
as we need to, yes, trust the legitimate news, but we also need to research for ourselves other information from other different places just to make sure we're getting the right information. And I'm gonna hold off till a little later because I have a different opinion on the news, so I'll let my fellow colleagues go.
No, and I think Caitlin summed it up pretty well. The first things like one of the news pieces that affected me today personally was that the Minnesota school shooting simply because it was a Catholic school and therefore my daughter goes to a Catholic school. So then there was these scenarios playing out in my head too, right? So one thing that I have to do is, look at facts. Okay, it happened in Minnesota. Realistically, that's it's like 1,000 kilometers miles away from me. Anyway, the second thing is to understand, like Caitlin said, there are, procedures and policies put in place for this. And so one of the things that I did was I just went to, the school thing because it's coming up now anyway, and to see what plans they have in place for if something like that happens. And by understanding how to be prepared in that situation, then, you can alleviate a little bit of that sort of that fear. But then I was still left with a little bit of the sadness because of the targeting and things like that. And in that way, what I did to deal with that is more just understanding again that, um, there are good people out there, good people that are willing to support, and there's more people willing to support than there are. Even though the news only shows us the bullets, there are more people willing to support than there are people actually doing that.
Yeah. No, I agree with both of you. And like Caitlin said, the news is always the shock factor, right? They want the audience, but at the same time, there is some truth in it.
Mhm.
So we have to balance it out and see what's true and reach within our community and explore to find out more, like Anna said, research a little more to see what's happening. But also, I think it's even though we know that the news is a shock factor, it still makes us uneasy because from personal experience, let me just share this. I travel a lot out of the country. I go back home a couple times a year. It's been going on for many years, so I would like to call myself a reasonably seasoned traveler. But in the past few years, we've been hearing so many disasters, flight disasters, things happening on, planes, incidents on planes. And because of that, the last time I flew, I was truly nervous. And I was like, what's happening to me? Why am I nervous? I've been flying all these years. But I had this really uneasy feeling. And yet I had to fly, and my tickets are booked. So I remember once I got on the plane, I was like, okay, I got through the first, the first, whatever the challenge to get on the flight. I'm on the flight now. I'm going to be okay. So it was kind of pushing through the fear, yet checking to make sure everything is okay. Are the flight routes okay? Are the, just calling ahead to make sure we don't have any delays, just checking in made me a little more at ease, but still, it was still fighting the fear and moving forward with it. So that always, that makes me rethink, however many times we've done certain things, the news does affect us. So if it does, I'm curious, what can you do that can help you stay steady when it feels really overwhelming, is there something that we can do that helps us say, okay, I know this is frightening, but how can we can't stop our lives. We still have to live. So what do we do to keep moving forward despite that fear?
Yeah, I agree with what Marigula says that some of the news can stop us in our tracks. It can cause anxiety, it can cause fear, it can cause us to modify how we live our lives or how we're going to choose to go about our day. That is something that we should all be mindful of. But what we can do is limit our time watching the news. This is big. Before that, I will tell you, like Caitlin was saying, so Caitlin is in an area where the fires are close by. And so she's monitoring. Of course, my first question is, am I going to die? Is this happening to me specifically? If it's not happening to me, and it does not mean that I want to diminish what's going on and what's happening to someone else, of course not. I'm just trying to self regulate my emotions so that I can deal with what I'm seeing on TV. And so, if I personally am not going to die, I need to ask myself another question. Is this information really pertinent for me right now? Do I need to have this information? If it is to help someone, of course. If it is happening in another part of the world, unfortunately, that there's nothing I can do, then I need to say to myself, okay, I need to disconnect. We need to learn to discern where we should let our emotions be guiding us. This is the number one thing. Just ask yourself, am I going to die? Is this happening in my neighborhood, in my vicinity? Is there something I need to do that I can do? And if not, take a deep breath and say to yourself, okay, there's nothing I can do for whatever's happening here, and disconnect. Okay?
I like what you
Uh-huh.
mentioned Anna, about how does this guide us? Where do we go when we feel these emotions? And I think there's a lot of positive that does come from the news in terms of effect. Sometimes people need that shock factor to do anything, or else they just say, well, this happens all the time. It's not a big deal. But they need to really feel the fear to take action. So if somebody's in a bad situation over and over again, let's say they live in a community where there's a lot of violence, they're used to it. But as soon as someone breaks into their house, now they're thinking about moving. Now they're thinking about getting security cameras, about barring the windows, whatever the case may be, to protect themselves. So I think we should always come up with the action plan to safeguard ourselves, take precautions. Like Regula said, before getting on the flight, you looked up more information so that you can actually be informed as to I take this flight. Is this the right route? Do I need a connecting flight somewhere else so I can feel better, so I can be safer? And sometimes statistics can also help. When you look at how many flights actually go down in comparison to car accidents, in comparison to cruise ships and things like that, you think, well, it's not happening as often as I may thought. I was just focused on the tragedy instead of all these other ways of transportation that are completely safe. And I think that's a really great aspect to look at as we explore how to overcome the challenge and different ways instead of just focusing on, I have to do this, but I feel unsafe. Listen to that gut feeling of feeling unsafe and then try to find the safety, what makes you feel calm. Because when you're calm and you go on that flight, you might see, okay, this isn't going to work, and be okay with the plan not working because you know that you have something else. You have a plan B, maybe a plan C, and so on, but at least have a plan B.
Yeah, just piggybacking off of what Anna and Caitlin said, all very good points. Limiting exposure, having the information. One of the things that really helps, and many of us aren't able to do it, is I have a pretty strict boundary of, I call it external stimulus. You can call it external garbage. You can call it BS. You can call it news. You can call it whatever you want to call it. So I don't check any news before 7:30 in the morning and after 7:30 at night. And I have this ritual where, I get myself grounded before I even have any external stimulus. But the issue is, and the reason why the news is so overwhelming to many people is because they go to bed late, or maybe they
Mhm.
go to bed early, doesn't matter. They get jerked out of bed by their alarm, but they get jerked out of bed by their alarm. They're immediately brushing their teeth. They're not taking a minute. Then they're pounding caffeine. And as they're pounding caffeine, they're turning on the news. So now you've got a caffeine spike, sugar spike, and anxiety in the news to sort of start your day. And that just tumbles into other things.
I love that. No, absolutely. Everything here ties together, right? And but one thing, Caitlin, what you said was as bad as there is news, the news also brings in a lot of,
Mm.
right? And if we are able to focus even a little bit on the good, I think that's the starting point to feel better. And I love what Chris you said is I too try to limit my news reading to either first thing in the morning, just the headlines after I wake up and I'm done with my morning rituals, or it's just headlines at the end of the day. I try not to let the news overwhelm me. I limit it, but I do need to know the headlines. So those two times are perfect, works perfectly for me. And I don't let the rest of the day, I don't allow the news, the noise of the news to come in the rest of the day. But one thing I do when I feel uneasy or anxiety, right? I tend to call my son. So reach out and say, hey, how are you doing? Kind of checking in with my loved ones, maybe just hearing their voice makes me feel better. And maybe knowing they are safe makes me feel better. So little things, and they add up and making me feel better. And also, I think reaching out into the community and just checking in with few people, how they're doing, maybe strengthens that feeling of we have a community, we have people who can support us in anything. I mean, life is so uncertain. Like, the news just magnifies the negatives, but there's so many other things like the communities we have, families we have. So I was thinking, what do I do if I'm afraid? And I usually want to hear my son's voice first. So I thought maybe reaching to your loved ones might be one way of starting to feel a little more grounded. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I think it's, if that's what it takes to ground you and you've discovered a routine that would help you when the news is too much, I think that's amazing because you're regulating your nervous system. Now have a plan, and you take action. You planned ahead. When this happens, I call my son or just want to check in on everybody. It kind of calms me down. And that is the right way to go about it. When you know and you're aware that the news, we're only talking about the news. So when you know and you're aware that the heavy news, I'm not talking about the good,
Mm-hmm.
because we all
Right.
need good news, but the heavy
Exactly.
news
Yeah.
affects. And if you know that you reach a certain level of anxiety and stress, what
Yeah.
Marigela said is perfect, is she created a plan that she can count on, that she can turn to in that moment. And that's a way of coming back down, calming yourself, knowing you're okay. Myself personally, I started watching the Good News Network because I only want to know the good news. Because the news years ago used to affect me and every day was breaking news, I decided to not watch the news anymore. I don't watch it anytime in the day. And if stuff, people call you, we're talking, we're not alone, that if something is happening, I don't know. Most of my family and friends know. So if something big is happening, they'll call me. And if that is so, I choose to turn it on in the afternoon when most of my important things have been done, unless it's going to directly affect me. So that's my plan and how I deal with it. And I'm quite happy with that, knowing that unfortunately, I'm kind of depending on friends and family to keep me up to date if something really is important for me. Other than that, I search for good news, try to stay positive, try to disconnect when it has nothing to do with you. But please develop a plan for that something triggers you, develop a new plan on how you can help yourself feel better in those moments.
I love it. I love how you protect your space,
Yeah,
right? And that safe space gets you through the day without all the noise. And also here, you are leaning in on your community and your family because you trust them enough to let you know if there's something you need to do. And that's beautiful. To have that strength of a community around you is amazing. So
absolutely.
no, wow, thank you for that.
For me, I take a different approach, and I think it's just situational. I went to people in a lot of scenarios and I would express my concerns and what I was stressed about, and they fed into it. And that was destructive for me.
Mm.
So, my Nana, I'm very close to. I speak to her usually every day. Some days I don't, I'm a little busy, but majority of times, at least 5 times a week. And every time I speak to her, she goes, "Did you go for your walk today?" I say, "Yes, I did." "Well, if you see a bear," "No, I'm not gonna see a bear." But
Yeah.
before it was the bear, it was a man in the bush. It
That-
was always something. And I think that's sometimes a mother's intuition, a grandmother's intuition is they just want their children, their offspring, and their grandchildren to be safe. And for her, instead of saying it in the right way, it was fearful for me because I started going on walks and thinking, there could be a bear. What is that rustling? And it started affecting me. So talking to the right people is important. And then in addition to that, there's times where I find myself physically stuck. I'm thinking about something obsessively. And when we talk about OCD, we don't have to be diagnosed with OCD to have the experience. Sometimes the experience is just not as frequent, so you wouldn't be diagnosed. But we describe OCD as obsessing over a thought, and that produces the same action a lot of times. So for me, if I'm obsessing over a thought, I will sit and I realize I need to get up. So that is why I go for a walk, is to change my surroundings. And one of the things that I started doing is looking for the color red. If I found myself continuously thinking in my head, my favorite color is red. So I would look for that color. And then I started being present and seeing what was in the reality instead of what was just in my head. And I found that was extremely helpful. But in addition to that, I think that sometimes we can write things out. We can have physical exercise. We can talk to people, but just find what works for you and explore the options and make sure that you're talking to the right people when you are talking to somebody.
Such a good point, because everybody's different and everybody's bird's eye view or angle of a situation is going to be viewed differently by different people. Like your nana is just telling you to be careful if there's like a bear and a man, and so maybe your friend won't say be careful of the bear, or you see. So it all comes from whatever that person has experienced in their life. Some of our fears are programmed, and so it depends who you talk to. But you were able to discern, like, okay, I know there won't be a bear, but I did cross your mind for a second.
And I think it's a privilege to be able to create our own community. Our community is not necessarily just where we are. We have the ability, all of us are in different places. I
Mhm.
don't know if any of us have met. I know I haven't met any of you in person, but we get to come together on a regular basis and have really positive discussions. And if people feel like their community is not supporting them, then explore those virtual options. It is a privilege to decide who your family, who your friends, who your community is. And there's so many ways to access that now. Chris, did you have any thoughts?
Oh, I have lots of thoughts.
Pertaining
Specific
to
to that,
this,
though. Yeah,
I
pertaining to
shouldn't have
that. See, you gotta
extended that.
be specific. Be specific. One of the things that I've found is that when we get, when we're scared, generally we get scared, and this goes back to what we were saying before about, getting details, having plans. A lot of the time we're scared about the uncertainty of it, right? And so sometimes what really helps to get you back in the moment is kind of like what Caitlin said when she was in the bush. She heard a rustling. Now I'm curious, Caitlin, when you asked yourself, what is that rustling? Did it alleviate any of the fear at all, or did it just heighten it? I'm just curious.
No, one time I ran, and as I was running, these very kind ladies said to me, "Did you see a bear?" And I thought, "No, but I think I may have heard one." So initially, no, but then after so many times, I was like, I finally did see a bear and I was happy about it, and nothing bad happened. So it was okay. I realized that they usually don't attack people. That's the facts. The area that I'm in, they're used to humans and they don't care to attack us. They're not like violent unless they have cubs. And in those scenarios, they generally don't come around people. So it was looking at the facts that helped me. But no, my initial reaction wasn't good. That's the truth.
I mean, nobody's initial reaction is usually good, um, in those senses. But one of the things I found is it's just by staying grounded and like being curious. Like, I'm sure this wouldn't be good in every situation, but especially in situations where you're really far away from something, I'd just be like, when you're worried about it and you're fearful of it, you can take steps to prevent it. You can plan, you can get curious about it. You can learn more about it from people actually on the ground there. So, like, one of the things that I do, we talk about community. One of the groups that I talk to is a really rather large group of people that they get together and they actually pick apart these news stories and they say, okay, which parts of these are true and which aren't. And I find that that does help a little bit. But, you know, besides that, again, it's just looking at the source, looking at the purpose of the news article, like of the news, like what is the purpose of the news? Is it, and again, Radula has said it, Caitlin said it as well. I think Anna touched on it too. If it's sensationalism, just remove that because a lot of sensationalism again is just tossing speculation into it. So what are the facts? What are you looking at specifically? And one of the things that I actually did, I'm actually still waiting about the Minnesota school shooting. I actually know quite a few people in Minnesota, and one of the things I did is reached out and just asked them like, okay, so what are you guys seeing? And what's interesting, not specifically with this case, but like I've spoken to many people, like with you, Caitlin, in Vancouver with the wildfires, and I've spoken to multiple people who were in Vancouver, and they all said that it wasn't anywhere near as bad as what the news was saying. Like the one person even said that the news prompted an evacuation and the fire wasn't even spreading that in that direction. I mean, even local government can be influenced by the news, which is, I think that's more scary than being scared of the news.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, these are all just things that are so real, right? Sensationalism. what is real, what is not real. And I actually lived in Minnesota for more than a decade, so I am familiar with the area that the shooting happened. I know the school. I've driven by it many times. So it kind of broke my heart when I read that. But for me, news, the term news was important because actually, since we brought up Minnesota, the weather there is crazy, right? Cold weathers. And I used to work in a school, and I have to wake up really early to drive out in really frigid conditions. As many of you in Canada know how it is. I've experienced that too. So for me, waking up and checking the weather was the first thing I would do in the morning. How is it going to be today? Do I need to clear out? What's the snow outside? What happened? So I have to drive out the car, make sure my son gets to school safely. So the news kind of just became the morning event that I relied on to begin my day. So, unfortunately, as much as they bring sensationalism, as long as we are able to just find what we need and reach out to the truth, it's important, I think, to stay aware. So, the awareness, to me, being aware helps with the fear too. And how do we get aware is knowing what is sensationalism and what is real. And that is again done through the ways we discussed, community, various news channels, or just being and, understanding ourselves where we can draw the line. If you look outside the window, are we seeing the fire? No. So we have an idea, just being naturally balanced and, being able to move past all this news. But some of the things are, Uber. Let's take Uber, for example. There's so many incidents that have come out, about how women have been traumatized during their drives. And actually, I read a piece of article where I think there was a gentleman who had a companion animal, and there was some incident with that. I don't remember the details. And there was something to that, and I'm not going to quote that because I don't remember exactly, but there's a lot of situations, and we all use Uber all the time. I do because I travel so much. I don't always rent a car when I go to a different city, so I'm now afraid to take an Uber after 8:30 at night or so, saying, okay, I don't know who's going to come and drive me. And I know they're bringing in women drivers. I don't know if that's already now an option, but they were talking about it. I think being the fear is a way to protect us too. Caitlin, when you ran from the bush, that fear protected you. If it were a bear, you don't want to be there.
Mhm.
It really protected you. You had to get out of the place fast. So fear is healthy. As long as we understand it's healthy and then bring the awareness and we don't stay steeped in it, we get ourselves out and then evaluate the situation, right? Okay, what now? So it's kind of, I think awareness is so critical for all of us to bring in any other tools to manage this, what the news is throwing at us. The first thing for me would be awareness, you know.
Yeah, absolutely, Margilla. So we look at the headline or sometimes it's not even the news, it's what people tell you. Well, I heard so and so and so, and it's
Yeah.
shocking. And then what your responsibility is to check if that's, get another way of looking that up and seeing if that is completely true. Because sometimes it's telephone. People are start saying something and it turns into
Yeah.
so yeah, awareness is key to anything. And being present when you're aware, whatever you're seeing on TV, just reflect, calm down, take a deep breath. Am I going to die? Is this happening to
Hmm.
me? Where am I right now? And then go from there. Then you should be able, or anyone should be able to watch the news without being too affected. It is hard though, I will say.
One of the things that helped me was this little analogy, and it helps in terms of me regulating what I share with other people. And the way I equate it is this: is okay. Most of the news out there is some guy some guy got hit by a stick. So somebody who saw it picks up a stick, starts telling me, and hits me with the stick to prove that, to show that someone got hit by a stick. Then I pick up that stick and I hit somebody else with it, because it feels like that's what we're doing sometimes. So,
Yeah.
like, it's also on us not only to filter the news and verify it, but I think that it should, well, I don't think it should, but I've taken it upon myself to also understand that not all news is valuable to all people. Like, there are certain people I would not share the Minnesota school shooting with. There are certain people that I
Yes.
wouldn't share the wildfires with, right? Because I know that it would affect them on some level, and it doesn't really pertain to them. Like, much like Caitlin, I had a relative that would go off the deep end sometimes, and panic about fires, and then they would extrapolate the fires to being outside their door, and the whole world's on fire, and so I think that we also, along with the awareness for ourselves, we have to have the awareness for other people. I mean, are we saying it for a reason? Are we sharing it for a reason? Or are we sharing it just to hit somebody with a stick because we got hit with a stick?
Yeah, good point.
So next time well, not the next time, when I get to meet you, Chris, I have to make sure you're not carrying a stick with you, right? I have to check. Are you carrying a stick?
There's been a lot of news, Verdula, so I might have 20 or 30 sticks.
But yeah, that's a good analogy, definitely. And that actually, uh, brings me to we are understanding how to manage ourselves because we're coaches. The methods of coming to an awareness, understanding, we practice mindfulness, we do a lot of things to become aware. And I loved what Chris said, and really following that thread where you said, you may not share certain things with somebody else because the news, the wildfire or Uber may not pertain to them and you don't want to traumatize them. So you're protecting them and they don't need to go through the same trauma or fear or whatever comes up, right? So, how would you? That's one way you don't have to tell them. But what if we are all there and we have loved ones or a little community around us? How do we help them as coaches or as people who generally care about the community? We are responsible. How do we help the people around us to manage that fear that they hear or, about the news or anything happening around them? How do we help to mitigate that?
I think one of the things as coaches that we've learned is you want to get to the root. What is really going on? What are you really feeling? What is coming up in association with this event? Is
Mm,
it based off of past experiences? Chris had mentioned before, uncertainty or the unknown. Is
mhm.
that the scenario? Is it because you're talking to the wrong people about it? So there's a lot of questions that we can reflect on for ourselves. And like we had mentioned before as well, taking that time. Don't wake up in the morning and have that sugar rush, that caffeine rush. Take a moment to yourself at the beginning of the day, at the end of the day, because the truth is, when you consume something all day, you also can dream about it. So even when you go to sleep, it's still there. You wake up,
Mhm.
it's still there. So for myself, I always don't want to invalidate somebody because their emotions are real. Whether the story's real or not, that's not up to me to decide. It's just,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter. The details of the stories don't matter. And I often tell people that. I don't think they necessarily like when I say that, but I get fed up with these long stories and thinking, I don't need to know the color. I don't need to know what song was playing. I just want to know how you're feeling. I want to be there for you. And sometimes people, they need more time to actually diagnose themselves. They need more time to say, this is how I really feel. Maybe I responded quickly, but when you react, you kind of take time to process your thoughts instead of just responding initially. So I think making sure that we're not invalidating somebody and saying, well, that's not real,
Right. Right.
but also making sure that we're providing that safe space. And I had a coach who I was speaking to certain matters and they were uncomfortable. And I started realizing that, but they never said anything. And I thought, but you're my coach. I should be able to talk to you about anything. And at the end of the day, we're all human beings. We all have things that we're working on. We all have triggers. So sometimes you need to speak to a professional. Sometimes you can speak to a friend, family member, and sometimes a stranger can help you. That's a beautiful thing. When you feel like whatever you believe in, you feel like someone was sent to you just for a moment when you needed it because you didn't have anybody else. That's a really nice moment.
I
Yeah.
love that. I just have to, at this point, it gives me goosebumps when you said that because I've had those experiences. When I was pushed against a wall, when I was desperate, not knowing what I'm going to do, I've had absolute strangers step in and just work through that issue with me for no reason, nothing. They just came in and left. So I completely understand and treasure the humanity around us. People come to us when we need, whether this is a connection in this life or past life. There are so many reasons for it, but we don't even have to go there. We just embrace what happens, and it's amazing. And that's a beautiful thing that you said there, Caitlin. And I agree to everything else. We bring others the awareness of what we ourselves have, but we help them to tap into their awareness, seeing where it is, and help them modulate that, moderate that and work through and offering that safe space. No, absolutely. That's somebody's dog, Chris. Hi.
I'm
Let's say
so
hi
glad
to your little
minded.
buddy.
I'm so glad
Yeah,
minded.
she. So yeah. So one of the things that I think that we were talking about, I'm gonna edit. I'm gonna mark that and edit that out.
Okay.
One of the things that we were one of the things that we were talking about prior was about support, and one of the things I wanted to hit on for support was we have productive support, but then we have destructive support. So Caitlin, I hope you don't feel too bad. I'm going to kind of pick on your situation a little bit. When your grand asked you about the bear and things, I mean, she wanted to be supportive, but it wasn't really. But then, like me being the smart Alec that I am, I might have just said, "Hey, Caitlin, no problem," and tossed you some bear spray. Like that's not very helpful either, right? So, what are some ways that you feel that you might really better support it in that situation?
So my nana mentioned bringing bear spray, and then I thought I would just be paranoid the whole time because now I'm constantly reminded because it's in my hand. It's like it's something I have to get. But I think what could have, first of all, I didn't ask. I didn't ask about the question. She just brings it up. And the realization that I have with my Nana is that she doesn't have a lot going on. She has osteoporosis. She is in her apartment by herself. She very rarely gets out. So thoughts ruminate. They just stay with her. And there's times where I have to get off the phone because I get irritated. So I realized it wasn't necessarily support that I was even looking for. But if I was worried about it, it's better to speak to somebody who is going on the trails I'm going on. And I talk to people in the community. I talk to strangers all the time. And I say, what has your experience been? You've lived here your whole life. Have you experienced wild animal attacks? So I started talking to people who have more knowledge and understanding. And I think that's the kind of support that is constructive. People who have had the experiences, people who are in a similar circumstance than myself and not watching the news from a distance, meaning the news from a place that is distant.
Mm.
It's not local news that she's watching.
Yeah.
She's only watching it because I'm here. So she wouldn't usually watch that. So I think that's the kind of support is people who have more knowledge and understanding because first of all, they're here and they can give me real updates and real information.
Yeah. So you're creating your bubble of awareness. You've had the sensation by walking and feeling some stuff happening. And then you've gotten into a heightened sense of alarm, stress, maybe anxiety. And then you have Nana, who tried her best, who's, adorable. I love her already. And then you came back to awareness. Hold on. Let me speak to someone who lives around here, who's been through here. Let me try and get more information. And that's what helped regulate. And that's the right thing to do. So if we would use this analogy towards watching the news, we would all be a little calmer because not everything pertains to everyone. Like you were saying, you could be watching the news across the world or in your backyard. But that was a good one.
Yeah. Yeah. So understanding how we are dealing with this news, good, bad, from the news sources, from family members who are concerned or not, with just their fears which are being transmitted to us. So many ways we absorb all this negativity, actually. It's a lot of it is negative because that's what is affecting us. We're not focusing on the positives. We're actually still talking about the negative news that's affecting us so much, right? And from whatever source it comes from. So maybe at this point, I'm just going to throw out this question. What can we do? What can we do? Maybe one intentional step that we can take to make sure we are not so affected by the news every single day and maybe lean more into the positive. And for myself, I think I live close to the beach. So I love to walk my dog. So I have tried in the mornings, first thing, to get out of bed, walk before I open my phone. I'm not succeeded that well, to be honest, but I'm trying. I'm making a very conscious effort to do that. My mind is clear, focused, and positive before I open and see what's happening in the world. So I wonder what works for you all, or, if you have anything that you're practicing on.
Well, what I do, and when it's summer here, is not look at my phone as soon as I get up
Hmm.
and go outside and just sit. And if the sun is there,
Yeah.
just sit even 5 minutes. It's important to be outside of our homes. We need to be a little bit in nature. And even if you don't have much nature around you, still being outside is enough. So that's what I do. I started doing that a while ago and I love it. And it's a way to change a habit. So when you have a habit of, let's say you might turn on the TV right away, you can do, I'm going to change that habit, but I'm going to do it at the same time I used to turn on the TV. And that will help you build new neural pathways and reinforce your habit because you're taking an old habit, you're going to change it into a new one. And that's an easier way to keep that habit. How about you, Chris? What do you do?
Well, I do like a lot of things, but I think the one that kind of helps me that might seem a little counterintuitive is just to put things in perspective. So we talked a little bit about awareness. We talked about supporting others. We talked about, is this happening to me? I tend to zoom out a little further than that, and I just say, okay, so these situations have happened before. They've been handled before, and people have come out okay on the other side before. I even go back as far as, even a few years ago when we had the Ebola scare. I'm not sure if you guys remember that. Everybody was worried about getting Ebola, right? And so, besides getting all the information and having an awareness around it, is just that outbreaks have happened before. People have survived. I mean, they're unfortunate, these situations are unfortunate, but I mean, people do persevere. Humanity pulls forward. And I try to find, three or four similar examples sometimes even of, where things happen, which is why I get so angry. And I work really hard not to get angry. I get so angry at every time they say breaking news, unprecedented, unprecedented, unprecedented. And it's like, dude, I only have to go back a decade to find things where this has happened before, and even worse, and people came out on the other side of it. Like even this wildfire situation, right? What was it? One of the first years I came back to Canada, I think it was the first year, it was 2020, 2021. We had way worse wildfires. My dog, who you heard barking before, was actually hospitalized for smoke inhalation, and we were nowhere near the fires. I think back in 2021, I mean, there was this huge cloud of smoke that just came over. Like with the ones this time, the fire was bigger, but the smoke and stuff was lighter, and yet all the air quality alerts were going off, and there's like unprecedented smoke in the air, and like, dude, no, like we literally almost suffocated in 2021 and made it through, and now you're just you're blowing this one out of proportion. So by just looking at the news, and it's hard to not sound callous sometimes, but it's like this has happened before and we have survived it. So why are we so sure that we're not going to survive at this time?
Yep. That's so good. That reminds me of when Marigela, whenever I take a plane,
Yeah,
I used to be very fearful, and now
yeah.
my kids might say, "Oh, I don't wanna take a plane." I'm like, "Get on the plane, sit down, and look at the stewardess or the steward, and they're walking with a smile, and they've done this 8 times this week. What are you worried about?"
Hmm.
And it kinda like Chris says, it's like we've gone through some of these things before. Just be aware. Go in your data bank, you can find it.
Absolutely. No, I get you, Anna. Yeah. Also, Chris, that was not sounding callous at all. It's the reality, right? These catastrophes, whether they are an epidemic or endemic or whatever turns up, they are going to be repeated every few years in different forms, in different ways, and humanity survives. But we take hits. We are going to take a lot of hits, and that's part of this life, this earth. But we can't worry about something we have no control over, or it's pointless. So we just accept it and learn to move forward in the best way we can, right? Awareness, taking care of ourselves, taking care of each other. And I don't want to miss out. I love what Caitlin said earlier about our community, the four of us. We met online in our coaching community, and we have created this panel where we converse and we connect with each other. And to me, that's becoming a family. We are almost a family. So, how people can reach out and create their families, create their communities, these are all such amazing support systems that exist. And we have to learn to tap into them, right? And I think these are all tools that we can learn and use, and it helps us greatly in everything, in whether we are hearing catastrophes or just dealing with personal trauma. It doesn't matter. It's the same set of tools that are going to help us again and again to reach in, become aware, and then reach out and take the support from everybody around us who are able to give that.
I think sometimes we find an outlet and it can work, and we have to be aware that it may not always work. That there's times where we change, our circumstances change. And one of the things that I encourage everyone to do is find a regular outlet. So something that you're doing daily, weekly, monthly, and then also find things that are unique because you may have circumstances change, emotions may fluctuate, and you may need things that you didn't need on a regular basis. So for myself, one of the things that I do when I'm feeling very overwhelmed for too long, and I consider too long a couple of days because I know that it's probably going to go on for a week if I don't do something, is I'll go to float therapy. So float therapy is you lay in this pod, the lights are off, you're floating. And a lot of times people don't think that gravity, it weighs us down. Like it's good, keeps us on the planet. We need it. We can't get rid of it. But our
Mm.
bodies never fully are not in a tense state. We are always keeping ourselves upright. Even when we lay down, like your back can hurt when you wake up because it's in a tense state. So when you're floating in water, it's very relaxing. There's no stimulation unless you want music or you want lights. That's up to you, but you can decide to do without. I like the point that was mentioned earlier about going to the beach. I love to go to the beach, and generally 2 hours out of my day, I will go on my lunch. So I take a little lunch break and I go to the beach. I do not live in the European area, but I've taken from them because from what I know, they have like 2 hour lunches. They take a little nap, they go to the beach. And I'm like, I think I could do that too. So I've started to incorporate that into my life. And that's the positives of news as well. I would never have known that was even an idea because where I've lived, there's always been 30-minute or hour lunches where people just get food. But when I hear about those kind of things, I'm like, wow, people are working 4 days out of the week. People are taking 2 hour lunches. They shut everything down. That might work for me as well.
Mhm.
And then one of the things that I actually did last night is I hosted a music bingo. never even knew what music bingo was. But what it helped me to do was integrate into a community, do something outside of my comfort zone, and I loved it. So it's also about trying new things. Your outlets can just be exploring new opportunities, seeing what works for you now. So I think out of all of what I said, it's having something on a regular basis and then also exploring new ways that can be outlets for stress, anxiety, things of that nature.
The float therapy? I think I'm on it for I have to get details from you for that. Sounds great. Yeah, no, absolutely. Try something new, try something that pushes you out of your comfort zone and take from it. Be open to new learnings, right? That is beautiful. Yeah.
And try something that can relax you, like Caitlin was saying. She's like, I'm going to take 2 hour lunch and I'm going to go to the beach. Whereas we're usually always going,
Yeah.
and maybe our way of treating ourselves would be an amazing dinner or, going out for friends. But,
Hmm.
I think more and more we're starting to see like a good way of treating ourselves is let's get in that float. That sounds delicious. Float therapy. Go to the beach, take a walk, just be present, you know, and enjoy that tree that's waving at you, in the
Hmm.
wind.
Yeah. Well, I think this has been an amazing discussion. The news is in our face every single day. When we were talking last time, Caitlin brought up saying, how do we deal with all this fear that the news brings? How do people deal with them? And that brought us to this topic today. So thank you, Caitlin. I should say thank you to the audience for being with us in this conversation today. So these stories that we touched on, from the school shooting in Minneapolis to wildfires in Canada, to safety concerns in everyday life, remind us that the world is unpredictable, even frightening at times. But here's what I hope you'll carry with you today. We don't have to let this fear define our days. We can acknowledge the weight of the news and choose how we respond, whether that's checking in on a neighbor, turning down the noise a little bit, or simply grounding ourselves in small acts of self care. Maybe walking in the beach, the beautiful float therapy Caitlin was talking about, anything where you feel cared for by yourself, self love. So, resilience from this fear isn't about ignoring what's wrong, simply remembering what's still right and building from there. And as you go about your week, ask yourself, what's one small thing I can do to anchor myself in hope and connection today? Thank you for listening. And thank you to my beautiful co panelists for sharing your heart, your insights. And until the next time, stay grounded, stay kind, and take care of yourselves and each other.